So far, we've learned about basic relationship types. Now let's expand on these techniques and discuss a general method for diagramming relationships for database systems. The method we'll learn is called creating an entity relationship diagram. These diagrams are often referred to as ERDs. It's a simple process that's useful for all types of relational database systems. Data modeling breaks into three phases. First, you'll look at your information in order to develop a list of entities, which will become tables inside your database. Next, determine and diagram the relationships between those entities. And then finally, you'll audit the diagram, following a couple rules I'll lay out later in this movie. Let's try one together. Here's a process description describing requirements of a database system that we need to build. In this description, we see the data we need to be storing in our database. In order to find the entities, it's important for us to identify discrete and unique buckets of information. A popular technique for identifying the potential entities is to look for the nouns within the text of our description. So go ahead and pause this video and take a moment to read this through. Using the Find the Nouns technique, we can identify potential entities here as orders, companies, and contacts. These each work as entities because they're different, discrete types of data, and each can be described differently from the others. So now we have our entity candidate list. However, just identifying the entities is only part of the process. Before these entities can become tables in our database, we'll need to first determine how they're related to each other. And to help us visualize these potential relationships, we'll want to create an ERD. But before we jump into this, I want to show you how entities are represented on an ERD. In your diagrams, it's common to show the entities as a box with the entity name inside of it. These boxes will eventually represent the tables in your database. To visually represent these relationships between entities on the diagram, it's common to draw a line between the two boxes with a double hash mark on the side that represents the many or the child table. Now we're ready to start exploring the relationships between entities in our example system. When you're sketching out potential tables, it helps to start asking yourself questions about how they might relate to each other. For example, you may want to pick two entities and evaluate the relationships between them first. Let's start with companies and contacts. And the questions we would ask will follow a one-to-many format. For example, we might ask, can each company potentially have many contacts? Yes. Let's say that each company should have many individuals working there. Can each contact be part of more than one company? No. Let's assume that a person can only work for one company at a time. So data modelers would call the relationship between companies and contacts a one-to-many relationship. And we'll visually represent the relationship between these two entities with a line between the two boxes. The double hash is going to be on the side of contacts because it's the many or child table in this relationship. Next, let's evaluate the rest of the relationships by adding the orders entity to the discussion. We'll start by evaluating whether there's a relationship between contacts and orders. In this situation, we would ask these same one-to-many questions. Can each contact potentially have many orders in the system? We'll say yes, that could be the goal, as many orders as possible, really. But can an order be associated with more than one contact? No, we'll say that each order has to be from one contact only. This tells us that we have another one-to-many relationship between these two entities with orders as the many. We'll want to represent this on our graph. Next, we would consider evaluating the relationship between companies and orders, but they're actually already related. Although relationships are not drawn between the companies and the orders tables directly, these relationships in between entities are still creating a chain of associated relationships. Therefore, the table on the top of the chain is still related to the table on the bottom. For example, a company could have a related contact who then places an order. Therefore, that order is related to the company associated with that contact through this chain of relationships. After you go through these steps, determining the relationships between each entity, then your ERD is done. If you have a small project, kind of like the one that we've used in this example, it might not seem to you that you need to sketch things out ahead of time. But from personal experience, I can assure you that taking the time to diagram your relationships during the planning stage will require a lot less work than doing so after you've already begun your programming.